Welcome to Introduction to Programming using C# and ASP.NET. What I want to show you today is the different data types in C# using ASP.NET. In any programming language, you need to represent data such as numeric data or string data. If you want to represent numeric data, there are different types of numbers that you may represent, positive, negative, or floating point numbers such as 4.5, 4.6. The positive and negative whole numbers are examples of integers. So if I do something along the lines of negative 250, 13, 0 to 610 that has no floating point, then you'd use a data type called integer. If you want to represent a number that has a decimal point, such as 33.3, 60.50.33, 22, 59.88, then you would use different data type called either double or decimal. Usually in C# we use double or float. When you are programming in any language, you need to declare variables. So there's a declaration section, there's a processing section, and there's an output section. Usually when you're dealing with initial programming problems, you're always going to have an input section where you're getting data from somewhere, or it may be the user typing in data. And you need to represent this data in terms of data types in the programming language that you're in. In C#, you have to your disposal, you have the integer data type, you have a long, you have a char, you have a float, double, bool, decimal, and string. So aside from char and string, all the other data types represent numbers. Oh, and bool. Bool represents true or false values. So for example, if I ask you to write a program that will compute the sum of two numbers, you need to declare the two numbers in a variable, then I would go ahead and say int num1 is equal to 100 and int num2 is equal to 200. So what I'm really doing here is I'm allocating space in memory and I'm declaring a variable called num2. Here I'm declaring a variable called num1 and their data type is int. Now I cannot assign a value that is not an integer to an integer variable. So I can't do 100.33. I couldn't do that. If I wanted to declare a double value, then I'd need to use a floating point data type such as double or float. So for example, if I wanted to do this, I can do that. So now you also need to declare where you're going to store the result of the sum of these two numbers. So if I want to do that, then you have to look at the data types that you're dealing with. Because you know that you're adding two integers, the result would probably be an integer. So if you do int sum is equal to sum1 plus sum2, then your result, num1 plus num2, would be an integer. So now if I do response.write, the sum is sum, and I go ahead and run this, so you get the sum is 300. Why? Because if I go back to my problem, I'm taking num1 and num2, whose value is 100 and 200, and if you take the sum of that, then that would make it the value of sum, the variable, is going to be 300. So when I write it out to response.write, the sum is 300. So you're not literally going to write out this text. What it's going to do is it's going to evaluate the variable itself and compute its value. At this time it's 300. Now if I stop this, you can do the same thing with double, and you can do the same thing with long. Now, let's say you wanted to add two floating point numbers. Okay, I would do double d num1 is equal to 100.32, double d num2 3. Now, because we're using a double data type, then my result will probably be a double. So I would say double d num result is equal to d num1 plus d num2. And then I will take this. Now, if you noticed, I've used something called a comment. So whenever I do a double slash, it means that the compiler will ignore these lines in my program. So I've commented these lines out of the code by using a double slash, just a filler in there. Okay, now if I run this, you will see that my result is a floating point number. This is 122.55. So it all depends on what the context of your problem is. If you're dealing with floating point numbers and you want to use a double data type, if you just dealing with integers and you want to deal with an integer data type. Now there's also a data type called bool. Bool will give you a true or false value. So for example, if I declare a variable such as the following, so bool answer is equal to false. Okay. So this will declare a variable called answer of data type bool. Now bool only has two values. It's either going to be true or false. So now if I write this out to compiler, the value of answer is answer. So as you see here, the value of answer is false. It's going to evaluate to what you assigned the Boolean variable for. Now what's bool for? Well, bool comes into play when you're dealing with a lot of conditionals and iterative operations, which we'll get to. It's very useful when you're trying to check if something is true or if something is false. And conditional operations will check this bool expression. So bool can either be assigned a true or false value, or it could be assigned an expression that will result in a true or false value. We'll see that later in the lectures. Now if you want to assign a string input or output, we would use a string data type. So for example, if I declare string str my variable is equal to hello world. When you declare a string, you have to denote the literal as using double quotes. And here you see the double quotes. So this is a literal string. Now I'm assigning a literal string to a string variable, which is of type string. Now when I do the concatenation, this will no longer do it will actually concatenate my variable with this literal string. So the value of str my variable. So once I do that and I run this, now as you see, it's taking the literal string here, concatenated with the value of my variable, which is assigned to hello world. Okay. Now what we're doing here is we're using an assignment operator. This is called an assignment operator. What this does is, as you've seen, it assigns whatever is to the right, which is the right operand, to the variable on the left. Okay. Now we can change these variables on the fly, so I don't necessarily have to stick with this variable. I can go ahead and change this and say no world. So initially I assigned it hello world, and then here I've changed the value to no world with an exclamation point. So now if I run this, it has the latest value, which is no world. Now let's say, for instance, you don't want to deal with a bunch of strings, you just want to deal with one character. Then that's what the char data type is for. The char data type indicates that you just want to deal with one simple alpha character. It can be alphanumeric. So if I say char grade is equal to A, okay, and I print this out, With char, you can only store one character in the variable, whereas in string, I can store multiple characters, a string of characters in the variable. You can still do a concatenation here. So value of grade is A, which is your value. But you cannot store more than one character in the variable grade. It's not allowed. If you wanted to do more than one character, then that's what the string variable is for. Another thing you should be aware of is when you are dealing with strings is that C# needs to make sure and be aware of special characters in your string. So for example, let's say we wanted to write out an expression such as my dog's name is Noah with a double quote, right? Now if I try and do this with my simple declaration and say my dog's name is Noah, because the double quote is a special character, C# will give you an error. Okay, this is not allowed because it's going to get confused. It's going to say, well, I thought the string ended here because you started double quote here, and I'm looking for an end double quote. Okay, in order to do that in C# you have something called an escape character. Very easy fix. So you use a backslash and a backslash. So this is a special character that you want to literally print out to the screen. The other character that you also may want to print out is the single quote mark. So you may want to do that here too. So now if I write this out to the browser, str my variable. Okay, if I run this, now it'll say my dog's name is Noah with a double quote. If you don't put the escape character here, it's going to give you an error. Okay, so you have to be careful when you're dealing with strings. If you want some special character and you're getting an error, it may be because it's a special character that is reserved. Okay, so this is called an escape sequence. Okay, escape sequence. And that's it for data types. Thank you for watching the video. Again, this is the fundamentals of C# programming in ASP.NET. Thank you.